Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It's Monday, November 25th, 2024. We skipped over the 24 yesterday, so hope you got your lottery tickets. And if you did, terrific, wonderful. And if you can become a billionaire, you did it. You're going to be safe for the next couple of years. You might have to give away a significant portion of that $1 billion, but that ought to work with the incoming administration. All right, we are ready for another, well, at least partial week of shows here. It is the fakest week on the calendar, where every day feels like a Friday because you're just minutes away from taking off for the rest of the week. It's Monday, Thanksgiving week. Thanksgiving, of course, for most people off, except for, I don't know, I guess a couple of people have to man the grocery store so you can run in and get last-minute ingredients, et cetera, and then they get to head home at some point, I guess. People, of course, take Friday off. People now take Wednesday, or began taking Wednesday off as a travel day. And then to avoid traffic on Wednesday, people began taking Tuesday off. And now we're back up to Monday. So, I don't know, every day feels like a Friday, except for Friday, which feels like a Saturday because you're done with all the work of Thanksgiving. So, it's a little bit of a wacky week. Lots to cover during this week, even though we may, I still don't know what we're going to do. It may be that the news flow with an incoming Trump administration, heading back into a Trump era, there's never really any day that you feel like you can skip a show, even a weekend. I force myself to do it anyway. But will we be doing a Thanksgiving Day show to keep you company? I don't know. You could be watching the parade, I suppose, or football games, or maybe this is how you pregame. It's possible. Of course, there'll be an awful lot of cooking going on, background noise. I know a lot of people say they love hearing the ambient noise, but prior to Thanksgiving, the ambient noise is, mixers and beaters and food processors and who knows what. So I don't know. I don't know if I'll be able to be heard over all of that. But it's another semi-chaotic weekend that we have to round up. We have, by the way, a gigantic mandate to round up the weekend. I just wanted to let you know. I voted for it. Greg voted for it. And that's it. Landslide. And I guess you can just claim that now. That's something I've discovered, a superpower that's out there. You can just say whatever you want. It doesn't work quite as well for me as it does for weirdo narcissists and power-mad lunatics. But, they're practiced at these sorts of things. All right. Like I said, plenty of things to round up for today. There's new cabinet and advisory positions that have been named, of course, and they're terrible. Some people were rumored to have been picked for something and then lost out over the weekend. We got to bring back one of our old-time sound effects now that Sebastian Gorka is apparently back in circulation.
The dreadful Hungarian.
That's the one, the dreadful Hungarian, and I wish I had better sound on that one, but a lot of people remember that one. I'd recognize it as, Sebastian Gorka back in the picture, and that's dangerous in a number of ways, and I'm sure we'll discuss all of that. And, some things that Justice was hinting at in his heads-up notices to us. We got stories about the transition period now underway. Apparently, no real rules or guidelines on what to do if an incoming administration, say, has no interest in signing the routine paperwork that makes transition work possible. Ordinarily, I don't believe in the modern security state era that we've ever had an incoming administration wherein the people who are asked to sign various confidentiality agreements, pledges not to divulge the classified information that would be shared with them during the transition, et cetera, pending their security clearances, et cetera, that they would agree to abide by the ethics code during the transition. And they simply refuse to do it and then say, hand over the keys, hand over the information, hand over the documents, gimme, I want the briefings, all those things. but I don't want to sign a piece of paper that says I won't tell all this stuff to Vladimir Putin or anybody else. Viktor Orban, if that's your preferred dictator. And they're just not signing it. And the officialdom sort of standing around saying, well, what do we do? I mean, we have a limited amount of time to get these people up and running to take over the United States government, but they won't sign the papers that allow us to do this. And then, of course, if I don't do it, these guys will be the administration. They'll remember that I refused, and then they'll arrest me for refusing to give them the classified information they wanted to sell to the Russians or whoever else. So I don't know. I guess I better give it over. I don't know exactly how they're handling that. But once again, another, democratic norm out the window, and there's no guidelines for what to do if people show up at their transition training and say, hello, I'll fill out this form. My name is whatever. Let's say, Tulsi Gabbard. And where it says name, address, fill it in, right? Occupation, international super spy. All right. Well, hold on a second. Are you going to sign this thing that says that you're not going to do any of your international super spying? No. I don't really there's no page in the book here. There's a flow chart, and there's not an if yes, go here, and if no, go there, because there's no no's. So I don't know. We'll have to so we'll see how the bureaucracy chooses to handle this. In the meantime, I'll tell you how I choose to handle Greg Dworkin's call. I'll begin by saying, hello, Greg, how are you? Ready? Hello, Greg, how are you?
I'm fine, David. How are you?
I'm lying if I'm fine. I'm doing all right. It's the big business of mopping up over the weekend. Our big show.
Well, it's always that. Yeah, it's always the big show where for some reason lots of stuff happens on the weekend, and then I only have like 45 minutes of material for my 20-minute slot.
Right. Well, okay. By the way, your segment lasts longer than Kelly Loeffler at the Department of Agriculture.
Yeah, well, longer than Matt Gaetz at DOJ.
Right. So, we have new time units that we have to deal with, and I thought I would meld the Scaramucci and the Gaetz and make it a Gaetzamucci, but I'm not certain how long that actually is. I didn't set the timer on Matt Gaetz, but okay.
Time is just a concept.
Yeah, man.
But a lot going on. My pundit roundup was labeled Trump was, is, and will always be a grifter, along with his cabinet picks. And I think, that's right. The through line that you can see everywhere. Yes, sexual abuse and
that's another one.
And weird stuff, sure. That even sucked in Linda McMahon, of all people.
Yes, eventually
with her. I mean, she was a bystander. She was aware of stuff that was going on in the wrestling world.
What? Like Jim Jordan?
So Vince McMahon is getting sued, and she's named as a party to the suit because she should have been aware and didn't do anything about it.
And she does love a party.
So, we'll see what happens with that. But, the big news, I think,
the big news
was still that, Pam Bondi replaced Matt Gaetz.
Yes.
And unfortunately, she has superficial credentials.
Yes.
She was Attorney General in Florida, therefore she's qualified to be Attorney General of the country. I
guess more so than Matt Gaetz.
Of automatic, why not?
Right. I guess everybody should, by the way, give yourself the title for the job you eventually want, like dressing for the job you want. If you happen to be a stock boy at the supermarket, you are the Attorney General of canned peas. And then
right. Whereas Politico put it, say we're interviewing people at DOJ. Swapping Bondi for Gaetz eases fears at Justice Department, but on a superficial level, she's qualified, the current DOJ attorney said. However, some Justice Department veterans expressed concern that Bondi might effectively be Gaetz without the baggage, that she could serve as a vehicle to carry out Trump's stated desire to target his perceived enemies inside and outside the department without the distracting allegations of personal misconduct Gaetz faced.
Well,
Bondi only
different ones.
Bondi only, sold the rights to suing Trump for Trump University in Florida for a pittance of a campaign contribution. So, she goes cheap.
Right.
The price is very low.
Had the Venmo memo line message been different in this payoff, she could be facing the same charges.
Right. But she's not good. It's just that from the overall big picture, the fact that she'll probably be confirmed because she's superficially okay means it's easier to go after RFK and, Tulsi Gabbard.
I guess so.
Who are the other two worst candidates now that Gaetz is out.
Yes, and Hegseth still survives.
And Hegseth, yes.
Yes.
And he's another worst candidate that is definitely worth going for.
There are many.
All of them.
Yeah.
The question on the table is if you could absolutely guarantee one of them doesn't fly, which one is it?
Yeah, you'll have a debate because there's so many good reasons to get rid of each and every.
Hegseth is terrible and unqualified, and he's a sexual offender, alleged. Yeah. And then, Tulsi Gabbard is a Putin tool, alleged.
Yeah.
And
she'll have access to everything.
RFK has every single public health person in the country thinking he's awful and he's going to kill us all and your children. So I'd probably vote for RFK as being the worst.
I guess so. It's funny. I mean, they all have the capacity to get us all killed. I mean, all of us. The Department of Defense, they're the ones who are supposed to make sure we're not killed by the people who want to kill us. Well, they're going to not do it. We'll all be killed. Or this one is supposed to protect our secrets that keep us from all being killed by terrorists. She's not going to. Oh, no, we'll all be killed. Whereas, eventually they'll kill us, maybe. But I'll be killed tomorrow by RFK.
Going after our children.
Yeah, I mean, right. We're going to poisoned milk.
Being a retired pediatrician.
Bad.
I put him top of the list.
Yeah, you may be right there. But everybody else has a very good case.
Well, those three.
It's just
really
you'll catch a bad case with RFK and you'll die before
exactly.
the other guys.
You'll catch your death of it.
That's right. He may just inject it straight into you. No one knows.
You never know. So as you were referring to in the
whatever we call this,
whatever you call
that
it,
mess
you say
were
at the
just
beginning
doing.
of the show.
Mic
I don't
test.
know if it has a formal name.
Sound check, I think. Yeah.
Sound check. Out loud musing, whatever it is.
Oh, monologue, like for the other guys.
Monologue,
If I had a suit, I'd be doing the monologue, opening monologue.
If you were Stephen Colbert, that's what you call it.
All right, I'll change clothes, and now I'll have a name for it.
Right. John Nichols, in I think it was in Mother Jones, was summarizing some of the numbers.
The Nation sometimes, yeah.
The Nation, I think it was The Nation.
Okay.
Harris is now winning a higher percentage of the popular vote than Trump did in 2016 or 2020. Trump got 46.1 in 2016, 46.8 in 2020. The surprise for us for this election was that Trump did better than that. He did 4 points better. He essentially got 50%.
Yes. Allegedly. Yeah.
And Harris in 2024 actually got 48.4. So she outdid him for 2016 and 2020. Arguably, she and her campaign did her job. It's just that those other people turned up. Again, just happened in Ohio 2004.
Yeah.
In 2016.
I mean, it's happened an awful lot of times. I mean, there's nothing you can do about, I need to get more people to vote for me. Well, but more people are going to vote for the other person. Well, that's bad.
Yeah, well, sometimes you don't expect them to turn out, and in fact, they turned out.
Yeah.
And again, a lot of that I attribute to, it's not economic anxiety per se, but it is. Mm-hmm. And that plus right-wing media blaming everything on Biden, and Biden and Harris's campaign being enough unaware of the fact that everybody was saying that on channels they don't monitor, meant that they didn't really have a counter for it. Yeah. And no, going on Joe Rogan wasn't the answer.
No, and also, I mean, some of the things, it's like, well, there's no countering nonsense, I guess, in some ways.
We'll talk about some of the nonsense.
Okay.
But
I won't counter
John Nichols goes on to point out Trump didn't win a landslide in 2024. In fact, it's one of the smallest margins in U.S. history. And I think that that's important not because it makes you feel better about losing, but because you get to counter the idea that this is a mandate. This is no mandate.
Right, which is why they're saying it's a mandate.
This is a 51% range win, and that's no mandate.
Yeah, well, we're all well trained in this. Is it a mandate? Ask Donald Trump. Yes, it's a mandate. You know what that means? No,
Trump
it's not a mandate.
50%.
He's lying.
Biden in 2020 got 51. Obama in 2012 got 51. Obama in 2008 got 53. this is nothing close to a mandate. And again, it's important because whatever they say, we have to treat it as such. And that includes the Senate, which, has to have some backbone about these ridiculous choices on the cabinet level.
Yes, we hope so.
But J.V. Last points out, talking about the things you can't counter. YouGov asked a series of questions on what percentage of Americans do you think are
okay.
Blank, fill in blank.
Oh, I see.
Blank being all sorts of qualities. Black, gay, Christian, left-handed, own a passport.
I don't know. Okay.
Here are some of the percentages that Americans on average think their fellow citizens are. Transgender, 21%.
People think 21% of the population
Correct.
is trans. Okay.
Muslim, 27%. Jewish, 30%. Black, 41%. Live in New York City, 30%.
30? What?
They
think
30%. 30%. We'll get to the actual in vivo percentages in a moment, said Last. But first I want to point out the absurdity. 1 in 3 are gay or lesbian. Muslims and Jews make up 57% of the country. Blacks are 40% of the population.
It's
not
an
to
invasion.
be crass, but if a third of the population is gay or lesbian, where are all the kids coming from?
Yeah, well, right. There's and the invasion at the border.
If a quarter of the country is either Muslim or Jewish, a third is Jewish and a quarter is Muslim, where are the mosques? Where are the synagogues?
Right. Why so much
pulled
pulled pork?
Anybody see more mosques and synagogues and churches as they drive around?
They're hiding. They're disguising themselves as WeWork offices.
So, when the population is ill-informed and operating off misinformation that's not countered by, a campaign, which it's not totally their job, but it's part of their job to at least be aware of it, if not counter it. You have to do that. So, but where do you put the information? Nobody watches TV anymore. So you have to get the information out to somewhere, and the center left, or even the center, or even the center right, doesn't have outlets to do this.
They're free.
Fox is allowed to lie, and there's just no other counter to it. But Fox is only a small part of the ecosystem that we aren't even aware of. Yeah,
apparently this morning's news says TikTok is the answer.
Why Harris didn't win?
Why didn't Harris? Who did? Who will tell me why?
I am.
Oh!
It's this ecosystem.
Yes, hello.
That's giving you all the garbage that there's no counter for.
Yeah, I guess so. Though people were beginning to hint to me today that TikTok is the answer. Although I don't know how, but and also
girls watch TikTok.
Isn't it Chinese?
Boys watch Instagram.
And we're supposed to be. Oh, do they?
Yeah, it's not even at all in terms of who the viewership is.
I did not know that. Well,
there's all sorts of stuff out there you have to become an expert on, which I am not, in order to really understand what's going on there. Yeah,
I really kind of was hoping to skip those sort of mini video formats. Something else will come along anyway soon, and I'll just join the next thing. But it seems to be that ended up being the pivot to video that everyone was talking about it, and it wasn't the ones they thought. It wasn't hosting video on your blog. Very weird. But yeah, TikTok, someone was talking about it, many people talking about it. Apparently, I guess, an enormous number of people report that they get all of their news, not only online, but not reading the New York Times online or anything, newspaper online, but TikTok. I didn't, as a news source, okay. Sometimes people make videos of themselves reading newspaper stories to you, like we do here on the show, and that's a format we should be thinking of. The show is over so quickly on TikTok. We'd have so much more time on our hands.
Yeah, but you can do so many of them.
Yes.
So I'm still struggling with how to pronounce Tradewives.
Tradwives. You know what? I don't know.
Tread like a bread.
That's what I've been doing with it, but I don't think I've ever heard anyone say it out loud. It's all written.
No, it's one of those things you write, but you never actually say out loud.
Yeah. Amanda Marcotte
in dark corners
will have a suggestion. Maybe she writes about it all the time. What do you say in your head when you're writing it, Amanda? I don't know. It's the only way I can think of to say it and not stumble over it. Tradwives. Even though you don't say traditional. You could. Let's start. How do you want to do it?
I don't.
Okay. I would like to avoid the whole subject. Thank you. What are they? Are you just struggling with it in general? Or did you have another trad wife story?
Tracy McMillan Cottom, we talked about that article last week. I just think is so good, talking about the trad wives podcasts and the bro podcasts, and how men and women are actually listening to different things, and coming away with different opinions. But the whole shift of and how people think is a little scary. Basically, Gen X was ruined by their exposure to Reagan and never recovered. And they're the ones that decided this election, and I'm looking at the generations coming up and hoping the same thing doesn't happen.
Yeah, right. They'll have been raised on Trump fascism and think that's normal, and who knows what they'll... Yeah. Well, send them TikToks. Tell them this is wrong. All right. Well,
I just listened to a couple of quick Instagrams because, as you pointed out, they're very quick. And trad wife seems to be the going pronunciation.
Oh, yeah, okay. Oh, and Scott just sent me one, too. All right, a pronunciation. Although, I always get a kick out of these pronunciation videos. I don't know whether you can't host a video on YouTube that's less than a certain amount of time, because they never... I want to hear, how do you pronounce trad wife?
Well, you can do that. They have little pronunciation.
Yeah, they do. They have the guides.
Which are only like 30 seconds.
Right, that's the thing. They don't just say... trad wife and be done with it. There's a whole... Sometimes they say it 9 times, but I guess there's a minimum amount of time they have to be.
I'm going to tell you how to pronounce trad wife. I'll do that in a minute.
Right.
But when I get to it, the pronunciation is trad wife, and then it takes 30 seconds.
Yeah, but it's like sticky content. And then there's one that's like a French
and now I just told you
guy.
how to say trad wife, so I hope you remember that trad wife is the way that trad wife is pronounced.
And they're very much like the trad wife or any other recipe site. I want to know what's the recipe. What ingredients do I have to buy? I have to hurry up and make this dinner. No, it's 19 pages about how much I love this food, and then what I like.
How I learned how to do it. And my mother-in-law's friend, who happened to be from an exotic country she never visited, was the one who told her brother who told my
the recipe,
uncle,
sir.
And that's how I got the. And then an hour and a half later, what's the damn recipe?
Yeah. So, click here. There has to be another click so we make traffic. Yeah, there's a French accented person who does a lot of these things. And we are looking today at how to pronounce the new word for an influencer who tells you how to put the recipes together and be a white nationalist. This word,
but it sounds, it may be a French accent, but it sounds like it's machine speak, So.
It kind of does. I mean, I don't know how you produce so many of these things without it being AI and a machine, but
anyway,
so we are looking today at what is on the rest of the show.
Melon Cotton said was Trump didn't win over minority and young voters because he figured out how to appeal their identity. He excelled at tapping into the information ecosystem, social media, memes, and the cultish, not Celtish, but cultish language of overlapping digital communities where minority and young voters express their identity. That's a meaningful difference. Trump's rhetoric and agenda may appeal to some voters based on racial identity, but the bigger story
is how
economic polarization scrambling and complicating identity politics, especially in online space.
I was told that was bad. Identity politics bad. But, of course, that was just, don't do it our way. We're going to use this to win. You stop using it. You could win if you use it.
Things aren't always black and white or red and blue. Here's an example from the New York Times today, just this morning. How universities crack down on pro-Palestinian activism.
Oh.
Stricter rules and punishments over campus protests seem to be working. Universities have seen just under 950 protest events this semester, compared to 3,000 in the spring. I think there's a lot of reasons for that, including the fact that you don't have Kamala Harris to kick around anymore. So, how did that work out? That's part of it, too. But I say that in the context of a piece by Perry Bacon Jr. in the Washington Post, which I also came across, which talked about the fact that education policy, interesting because of Linda McMahon taking the helm there, is one of those topics that really doesn't have a red versus blue. There's some things like there's almost a consensus about.
education.
One of them is cracking down on pro-Palestinian demonstrations.
Oh, yeah, as it happens. True. Okay.
That's one of them.
Yeah.
All right. But a clear majority don't like vouchers.
Okay. I mean, shouldn't. They're bad.
In Nebraska, 57% voted to repeal the voucher initiative, and in Kentucky, all 120 counties and 62% of voters rejected a proposal to start a voucher program. So people still like public education.
Okay. It's free.
Now, we're talking about Republicans and Democrats, voters, who are unified against the desires of powerful conservative groups and Republican politicians, Bacon writes. So in other words, yeah, he doesn't have a mandate. And here's an example of how he doesn't have a mandate.
Yeah, okay.
Right, the political right has long been frustrated with American education pushing a number of major changes, most notably vouchers, but that's not flying. And they're not outliers, those two states. And another, one of your favorites, Moms for Liberty, that backs right-wing candidates running in local school board races, has struggled. Only about a third of the candidates that back won races last year.
They were all at sex parties.
There hasn't been a detailed analysis yet for 2024. There's been a strong backlash against Moms for Liberty and other conservative groups. Meanwhile, counties throughout Florida, where Trump won easily, voted to increase local property and sales taxes to boost public school funding.
Oh, increasing tax. Trump has already increased taxes, we could say.
Right. So there's a lot going on in the education front that, in fact, support the idea that, no, Democrats aren't outside of the mainstream.
Okay.
It's just a unique character.
Yeah. Well, okay. I mean, we're definitely in for a bumpy ride here.
Partly because people buy into the idea that he's a businessman, and Americans, for whatever reason, have a reasonable view of business people. That's what happens when unions aren't strong.
Oh, we'll talk about that.
Hi, I'm Scott Anderson, the guy that writes the daily summary for this show, Kagro in the Morning. Thank you to everyone that supports this show. Many of you send donations through PayPal, Patreon, Square Cash, Radio Public, and so on. Some of you write your own essays and send them in, or read articles with your own commentary. We appreciate it. Now, some of you are listening to this and thinking, I'd like to help, but isn't there something I could do that wouldn't require money or effort? Why, yes, there is. You can just like us. On Daily Kos, they call it the recommend button. YouTube has a thumbs up. There are hearts and likes and love buttons. Tap our love button. Tap our love button every day. Share our shows and summaries on Facebook and Twitter, YouTube and iTunes, Stitcher and Amazon. Most of these places allow you to write a review, so a sentence or two would be great. Recommend us to social media, or tell your friends to listen to the show. You aren't just helping us, you're helping them find their new favorite thing to listen to. You could change the world. So thank you in advance from me and everybody else in the world.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let's continue rounding up the mess of a weekend because Trump is alive and relevant again. So now weekends are ruined.
So going back to this Perry Bacon piece,
yes,
he points out that on Truth Social, Trump was touting Linda McMahon as education secretary because of vouchers. We just went over the fact that vouchers are incredibly unpopular.
Okay.
So I don't think that's
so he's
gonna
doing
fly.
Great. Yeah, I might be fine on Truth Social, but it was never designed to expose him to, what people are thinking. But
right.
Yeah, that's something. Once again, given the choice, the unforced error of opting to marry yourself to an extraordinarily unpopular policy position. Of course, he did that with abortion, and in the end, it didn't work out the way we thought it would. But along the way, it did. Lots of special elections and referenda that did not go his way.
So we'll Bacon sums up by saying, if I had to guess, I would predict that education policy continues to be an issue. It doesn't break down along party lines. It's personal for so many Americans, and it's complicated. Exactly how should colleges have handled the Gaza protests? The happy middle for America might be a robust public school system, more of a democratic goal, along with less liberal colleges that fewer people attend, which is more in line with what Republicans want. So there you have your compromise, and that may be, in fact, what winds up happening, at least over the next few years.
I guess. It's a plausible outcome.
I mean, it's easy to see how you could make it happen. You have states like Florida, which are basically ruining their higher education system.
Yes.
So, like, why would you want to go? Or you make it so that, okay, we're going to subsidize it less so it's too expensive, so now you can't afford to go.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of different ways you can make people just take the state of Florida, not go to Florida universities unless you play football.
Right, in which case you have no other choice.
In which case you can't touch those.
Yeah.
Also a consensus.
Oh, yeah, and there'll also be that'll be a strong consensus for don't ruin the football for us. So It may just be a football program with an educational degree attached.
This is a column by E.J. Dionne in the Washington Post.
Yeah.
Which is, along the lines of nothing is as bad as it seems after you lose. Because after you lose, it always seems awful. But this is the lessons in progressives' hidden 2024 victories. The Republican pivot away from abortion and same-sex marriage remind liberals that they can win. In other words, Republicans are going to tell you abortion wasn't a big issue. What they really mean is we decided not to run against it because it's a loser. It's already decided. People don't like full restrictions, so we're going to stay away from it, change the subject, pretend this, that, or something else, at least dump it on the Supreme Court, if nothing else. Mm-hmm. But that's because American Democrats and center-left people, women, however you want to classify them, have won the argument. Same thing with same-sex marriage. It's here. It's not going anywhere.
We hope not. I mean,
they don't want to fight on that. They want to do trans. They want to do other things.
Yes, although, we're also warned. Sometimes, should they find enough success in attacking trans people, they may then march on and take on others. I don't know. They certainly might. It's certainly something to watch. But, I guess there's an argument to be made for, they might grab their victory if it's available to them on transgender issues and then turn elsewhere. There's no shortage of people they could turn to persecute for political points. Could be anybody.
So this is E.J. Dionne talking about when and how and why that happens.
All right.
How is turning to trans issues so effective? Immigration is a staple issue for far-right voters across Western democracies because it speaks to the unease many of them, particularly the economically stressed, feel over what they see as the cause of social, cultural, and demographic change. And it's important to point out the economically stressed also includes minority groups.
Yes.
Right?
Usually does.
If Latinos feel that blacks are taking their jobs or vice versa, and there's certainly areas of the country where those stresses are real, then there's no coalition. And if there's no coalition, that's not something that Democrats can count on or tap into.
Well, the coalition doesn't just happen by itself. The skill is weaving it together and explaining why you attacking you is not a good idea and making sense to them.
But, they don't always have the same goals. So, again, this is why compromise is important. And when you feel like I can't compromise or I'm not in the mood to compromise, that's a problem. So this is why Robert P. Jones, president of the Public Religion Research Institute, and with whom I've worked on surveys over the years, sees immigration and ethno-nationalist impulses surpassing older moral agendas as priorities for many Christian conservatives. Trans rights similarly challenge traditionalist voters who feel buffeted by liberalizing norms.
Mm-hmm. Oh, no.
Because of those victories, social liberals have, in fact, won, which is, same-sex marriage and abortion issues. And one fact makes trans issues a harder reach for many Americans compared with same-sex marriage. Many more Americans know somebody who's gay or lesbian than somebody who's openly trans. That makes the road forward more difficult, but then few anticipated the speed of the transformation that's already occurred.
Yes.
So being mindful of largely hidden liberal victories of 2024 doesn't mean downplaying the challenges, but to acknowledge the gain is to see that the country Trump will lead is neither as supportive of his agenda, whether it's vouchers or anti-abortion, as he claims, nor is allergic to progressive change as many of his adversaries fear. One defeat, however stunning, does not discredit the value of persuasion and coalition building. They take time, and they still work. So, I agree with all of that. I'm a big one on persuasion. And again, demeaning or disparaging the Harris campaign, given the buffeting forces that they had to run against, they did actually a very credible job. It wasn't good enough, which is why everybody says it's a loser.
Yeah,
they lost the election.
I mean, you can't deny that. Well, there are people who deny it, but I mean, you're not supposed to.
But if you cut a 7-point deficit to 3.5 just because of the campaign, you've done your job. The problem is it was a 7-point deficit.
Ah, yes. Right. Look, it turns out that everyone was wondering what the electorate in the end was going to look like, and
now we know.
Yeah, and there was lots of people predicted this electorate, not necessarily of that size, but that essentially the whole Trump campaign was aimed at bringing out people that traditional models won't predict.
Right. Well, in other words, the right-leaning polls are more right than Jay Ann Seltzer, for example, who's retiring.
Yes.
But at the same time, you go back and you look at the total victory in the 7 states. We're talking about, 300,000 people.
Yeah, I think a little less.
Total.
Right.
For the all 7 states. That's a very, very narrow victory.
Yes.
But it's a victory. And so once, the victors write the history. And so, again, I'm saying all of this because no mandate means you can credibly argue that, no, that's not the right direction, and no, you didn't get a mandate to go that way.
Right.
You lose 54-46, you're stuck.
Yes, you might have to.
There was no arguing
with
against
the mandate. Yeah, and then what happened to the generation that was raised that way? Now they think everything's a mandate.
Yeah.
I guess. And, all right.
Reagan actually had a mandate.
Okay. Boo.
Yeah. And, confirmed it not against Carter, but against Mondale.
Right. Okay. Well, like we said, now everybody just thinks if you won, it's a mandate.
But it's not, and so that's why I keep bringing this stuff up. Anyway, let's see what else we got here. More scam stuff. Remember, everything about Trump is a scam.
Okay.
This is from the New York Times. Trump is running his transition team on secret money. Breaking with past practice, President-elect Donald Trump has not agreed to disclose the donors paying for his planning effort or to limit their contributions. So not only does he not sign the papers, not only does he not cooperate with the Biden administration, he didn't do that last time either. But, he's running a ton of money and he's not telling you where it's from because, it's all a grift.
Yes. And it reminds me, the last time we went through, or were gearing up for an inauguration after the 2016 election, we learned, for instance, that inauguration funds are not scrutinized, patrolled, and don't require the same disclosure as campaign contributions and the like. And it's very easy to disguise where inauguration fund money comes from. And I guess now also transition fund money as well. And so I have to re-up my prediction that Trump will be demanding appearance fees for going to inaugural balls that are held in his honor. And I'll go to yours if, I don't know, let's say there's a Proud Boys ball or something like that. I'll go, but remember, you need to pay me, he may have a sliding scale for the Proud Boys. Only $100,000 for you, but $1 million for the venture capitalists ball or whatever.
His ask may not be monetary.
That's true, too. Could be anything like, we don't have $100,000. Well, then I need you to beat up immigrants.
Stand by them.
Right, yeah. I need you to come and there's certain people I need you to beat up or round up. Some kind of up we're going to be asking you for. That's true. That could be, but yeah, so new area of corruption. The inaugural funds was designed that way. For whatever reason, they just didn't require this kind of disclosure. Transition funds, I don't know what the rules are, but it doesn't matter. They're going to make new ones. I'm going to take secret money.
They're large but limited in time. I mean,
right.
The inaugural doesn't last for 4 years.
Traditionally, no. Maybe this one will.
Well, there's other ways to grift, too. This is yet another New York Times article that Paul Krugman covered on Blue Sky. Trump's trade agenda could benefit friends and punish rivals.
For sure.
Donald Trump has a record of pardoning favored companies from tariffs. Companies are once again lining up to try to influence him.
Yeah, that's...
So, tariff? Well, what if Elon Musk has a car made not in the United States? Well, it doesn't count.
Right. Not for him.
That sort of thing. And that's one of the more egregious examples. But like everybody knows, the purpose of tariffs isn't to help the economy in any way, shape, or form. It's to be another lever of power and influence over companies that Trump plans to use like a cudgel. Mm-hmm. That's what it is. It is nothing else. And so why would tariffs actually get done if they're so bad? Because they're good for him, not the country.
Right.
Yet another grift. Mm-hmm. So Bergman looks at this and say, good to see the Times picking up on a theme song some of us have been hammering for a while. Trump's tariffs, and especially an opaque exemption process, will be an engine of massive crony capitalism. They cite the same study of Trump 1.0 tariffs I highlighted a week ago in my column. Of course, the tariffs will be much higher and broader this time around, so the scope of cronyism will only be much bigger. And tariffs won't be the only new frontier for corruption. Somebody else has made this point, but I haven't seen it. Deportations will also become a way to reward friends and punish enemies.
You bet.
Whatever he says, Trump won't be able to round up 50 million people. So these are scattershot raids on businesses suspected of employing undocumented immigrants. Which businesses? Which will be left alone? Well, pay me and I'll look the other way. I mean, basically that's what's going on here.
Yes.
And, what's disappointing to me, I get why people were frustrated, but you elected this guy. You said this was okay to do. That's your mandate. Mm-hmm. Because he's going to take it as, well, I can grift all I want to. You voted for him. You did this.
Yes.
You are totally responsible for it. Completely 100%. And it's got nothing to do with I didn't know.
Yeah.
You knew he was a crook.
Mm-hmm. Well, just as there are people who voted for him saying, well, he's going to start by, people who are from vulnerable populations vulnerable to deportation, let's say. But he's only going to deport the criminals. And I'm not a criminal, even though Trump regards your presence in the country as criminal. Right.
What the voter's going to find out is that basically, he left me alone, but he's basically grifting and making everything crooked at federal level. Mm-hmm. And I never trusted the federal government anyway, so see, I was right.
Yeah. And then, though, you'll find out, well, he's not going to deport my workers because I was a big Trump supporter. Well, how so? Well, I went to all the rallies. See, he can't count that. Well, I did contribute. I gave him $100. Yeah. It'll start out with the people who didn't give him any money and very quickly progress to only $100, only $1,000, only $100,000 you gave me? You're a big business.
So
let's make up for that.
Kerr and Radley Balco point out that something bad is likely to happen because there's no remedy.
Yes.
Oren Kerr points out it's time to enact a statutory Bivens remedy.
We haven't time to...
allowing lawsuits against federal officials for violating constitutional rights. It's unfortunate this didn't happen, and I fear the next 4 years will show us how unfortunate it is. Radley Balco points out Democrats need to make it a high priority to find a few Republican votes and push this in. There's currently no practical way to hold any federal law enforcement or any federal official, not just law enforcement, accountable for even egregious civil rights and constitutional violations. But I don't know. You pass it, so what? SCOTUS will do whatever the hell they want.
Well, there's that.
When you have a corrupt SCOTUS, none of this has the same meaning to me that it used to.
Yeah. Well, that's certainly true. But I don't think we even get that far. Like, they should pass something. There's 30 seconds left in this Congress.
Yeah.
And,
well, this is one that's worth passing, even with 30
Sure.
seconds.
But you can't. One, you don't control both bodies. Two, the one you do control is in a last-minute sprint from, hey, last week you told me you wanted every waking moment to be judges. So I'm working on the judges. Oh, yeah, you know what? Actually, you need to find compromise with the Republican House and pass this enormously aggressive and progressive and foresighted policy to restrain the incoming fascist administration. I make the odds of that 0, but it's a great idea. But when, how, where, with what, and does it make a difference in the end anyway? Suppose you squeak it past. You know what? Fine. Republicans jump on board and say, I'm 2 years from my next election, and we just said we won in a landslide mandate. But yes, let me mollify moderates in my district with this set of handcuffs for the incoming fascist administration. Nope. No, I won't be passing that. Sorry. But an excellent idea. Good theory. Don't roast Democrats too badly for not charging to the rescue by scheduling this for floor action immediately. Because when, where, how, why, for what reason, what chances of success. Sometimes, and people do it as a messaging bill. 2 years from the next election? Sure, it's the time for messaging. I mean, he's right. It deserved to have been done a long time ago. It didn't get done a long time ago, and it may never have mattered in the face of the Supreme Court. But it's you should point that out. That is a chief concern. Yes.
Anyway, that's it for me for today.
Okay.
As I said, it's Monday. All this stuff happened, and somehow or other,
it will keep happening.
I don't have an hour's worth of stuff to talk about.
Well, yeah, at some point. Well, right. What would be the point, right? Well, the Supreme Court's going to strike it all down anyway. So why don't we just declare this to have been constructively an hour? And you did a great job. How about that?
Well, I declare a mandate.
Why not? It's going to be a short week. It can be a short segment, and it wasn't that short. 48 minutes and counting. So thanks, Greg. I appreciate it. And if you think of anything, on the way out the door, there's always the back channels. And that sometimes happens too. Oh, I only have 45 minutes worth of material. But here are 7 more stories.
Look at these now that I'm not talking and have a chance to look stuff up. Look at these 9 things I just
The whole show is Greg. Yeah. Well, good. It's helpful. I enjoy it. People seem to like it. They stick around. So, okay. If anything occurs to you on the way out the door, by all means, slip it underneath.
If I didn't offend anybody today, I'm sorry.
We'll get to it. Right. Okay.
Just a reminder again to our audience, I won't be here Wednesday. I have no idea what Dave's doing this week.
Well, okay. No Thursday. We might solo it. We might do an hour. We might do nothing. I keep thinking about, you should take the day off, play a rerun, but how many Thanksgivings in a row have we done this? And I have to go back to 2012 to find a show.
Well, they keep doing Thanksgivings.
Yeah. Every year.
And so we keep doing
it. Not even to thank anybody for or not.
1979 show.
Right. Exactly. I'm thankful for my bell bottoms, I would say. Okay.
All righty.
Talk to you soon, Greg. Okay. Well, let's see. How about some other things? Well, there's so much. Let's see. Where do we stand in terms of time to get something read out? Well, there's so much. We haven't talked enough about Tulsi Gabbard and how bad she is. We've said that she's bad a lot. And I don't think I've read a whole lot of articles outlining the how and why. And I saw one today, and so maybe we'll share this one from The Independent. All the news is being reported by the British papers for some reason. The American papers one at a time selling out to the Trump agenda, I guess. And maybe that's what leaves us with the British agenda. Tulsi Gabbard's history with Russia is even more concerning than you think. You dummies, what are you doing thinking that it's less concerning? I love it when they tell you that. This by Richard Hall and Andrew Feinberg, who are people that you should listen to. But Andrew Feinberg's name is familiar. He's a White House correspondent for The Independent. Maybe that's why we hear his name all the time. Who's Richard Hall? Well, he's probably a something else correspondent for The Independent. But I don't know. I guess I thought they might be there. They're both correspondents, and they're quite senior. Tulsi Gabbard's history with Russia is even more concerning than you think because of how dumb you are. One expert says her views are, quote, so wildly fringe. I feel like Johnny Carson. How fringe are they? They're so wildly fringe that her potential appointment as DNI is genuinely alarming. Which I now feel disappointed in all this because I feel like this is what everybody's reporting. But how so, Richard Hall and Andrew Feinberg? Let's find out. In the summer of 2015, 3 Syrian girls who had narrowly survived an airstrike some weeks earlier stood before Tulsi Gabbard with horrific burns all over their bodies. Gabbard, then a U.S. Congresswoman on a visit to the Syria-Turkey border as part of her duties for the Foreign Affairs Committee, had a question for them. How do you know that it was Bashar al-Assad or Russia that bombed you and not ISIS? She asked, according to Moaz Mustafa, a Syrian activist who was translating her conversation with the girls, which I guess is a decent question behind the scenes as an intelligence operative, but face-to-face with the victims seems a little less than sensitive and maybe not even all that smart a question. It was a revealing insight into Gabbard's conspiratorial views of the conflict, and it shocked Mustafa to silence. He knew, even as the young children did, that ISIS did not have jets to launch airstrikes. I was thinking, I'm wondering, is it that dumb of a question? Like if it was a roadside bomb, I suppose you could ask that question. But if like a jet comes and drops on you, how do you know it wasn't ISIS? The jets, not the football team, but the jets. The ISIS lacks for jets. That's the issue. ISIS does not have jets to launch airstrikes. It was such an absurd question that our translator, Mustafa here, chose not to translate it because he didn't want to upset the girls, the eldest of whom was 12. And again, children putting themselves out there to try to make the international humanitarian case to Tulsi Gabbard, and she refuses to see it. And from that point on, I'm sorry to say, I was inaccurate in my translations of anything she said, Mustafa told The Independent. It was more like, how do I get these girls away from this devil? Wow. Even before Gabbard left the Democratic Party, ingratiated herself with Donald Trump, and secured his nomination to become Director of National Intelligence, she was known as a prolific peddler of Russian propaganda. In almost every foreign conflict in which Russia had a hand, Gabbard backed Moscow and railed against the U.S. Her past promotion of Kremlin propaganda has provoked significant opposition on both sides of the aisle to her nomination. Her journey from anti-war Democrat to Moscow-friendly MAGA warrior began in Syria. The devastating conflict was sparked by pro-democracy uprisings in 2011, which were brutally crushed by the Assad regime. It descended into a complex web of factions that drew extremist Islamists from around the world and global powers into the fray. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, or SOHR, a UK-based monitoring group with a network of sources on the ground, documented the deaths of 503,064 people by March of 2023. It said at least 162,390 civilians had died in that same time, with the Syrian government and its allies responsible for 139,609 of those deaths. And as precise as the numbers are, I'm sure it's rather fuzzy, but sometimes people claim a mandate by virtue of their precision, even if they've, how do you decide a question as complicated as is the Syrian government or its allies responsible for this death or not? Bombing makes it pretty easy. Who knows what other ways there. Oh, anyway, you get the idea. But Gabbard, about Gabbard, a veteran of the Iraq War, viewed it as all of it as a regime change war fueled by the West and aimed at removing the dictator from power. She saw Assad and Russia, when it entered the conflict, as legitimate defenders of the state against an extremist uprising. In 2015, when Russia entered the Syrian war on the side of the dictator, Assad, Gabbard expressed support for the move, even as the civilian toll from Moscow's devastating airstrikes grew into the thousands. Al-Qaeda attacked us on 9/11 and must be defeated. Obama won't bomb them in Syria. Putin did. Hashtag never forget 9/11, she wrote on Twitter. It's a bit of a mishmash. It was precisely because of her support for Assad and Russia's war that Mustafa was keen for her to attend the congressional delegation to southern Turkey to meet the victims of the conflict. From experience, everyone that we bring over to the border, oh no, another border, and they see the victims, they always come back with a realistic view of what's happening and who is behind the mass displacement and killing and atrocities and so on. So that was the objective, he said. What was shocking was her lack of empathy, which now explains what she's doing in this administration, I guess. She'll sacrifice the facts even when it came to little girls in front of her telling her they got bombed by a plane. It didn't matter. Charles Lister, a senior fellow at the Middle East Institute who testified twice on Syria to the House Foreign Affairs Committee when Gabbard was a member, spent years debunking her various conspiracy theories about the war. Her consistent denial of the Syrian regime's crimes was so wildly fringe that her potential appointment as DNI is genuinely alarming, he told The Independent. He made the subheader in that one. Lister said her views appear to be driven by a strange fusion of America First isolationism and a belief in the value of autocratic and secular leaders confronting extremism. She's going to find herself on the outs over the secular leadership here in the United States. They included a suggestion that Syrian rebels staged a false flag chemical weapons attack against their own supporters to provoke Western intervention against Assad, something the U.S. intelligence agencies that she will soon lead had concluded was false. She declined to call Assad a war criminal when pressed, despite masses of evidence, and used a video of Syrian government bombings to criticize U.S. involvement in the war. Her descriptions of the crisis in Syria read like they were composed in Assad's personal office, or in Tehran, or Moscow, not Washington, Lister added. Her Gabbard was not swayed by meeting the victims of Assad's airstrikes. We already heard a little bit about that in 2015. And in fact, 2 years later, she went to Damascus to meet the Syrian president in person and came away even more convinced of her, I would add, very weird opinions. Oh, I've turned the music up to 100%. We're going to need it down around 30% for this break. Gabbard, not swayed by the facts, then went right and met with Assad. She said her visit to meet with Assad, the first by a sitting U.S. lawmaker since the conflict began, was aimed at bringing an end to the war. But hey, apparently unsuccessful on that front. All right, a little bit more about this and maybe more speculation on how bad she is after this break. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Roots Radio. I'm going to continue reading this, although it's interesting. The focus on Syria, I mean, it's a good one. And I know that this has historically been discussed, but I feel like, again, the focus is a little bit repetitive. And although I mean, to me, it's more like, well, if you're adopting it's one thing to adopt pro-Syrian stances. Like, I don't think there's a very super serious threat of anyone like. Not that they wouldn't do it, but I just don't think that even Tulsi Gabbard would see any strategic value in, say, sharing valuable intelligence with the Syrians. But the idea that she adopts a more pro-Russian stance, like they'd be more interested in gathering this intelligence. So the Syrians would take it. Of course, they would take it and sell it to Moscow. So if it just happens that she has this strange affinity for Assad, but not necessarily for Putin, the material still makes its way to Putin. I mean, the ultimate problem here is that she's somebody who's convinced that the United States does better in an international security setting by aligning itself with Moscow and Putin and others. And so things that every prior administration, including probably the first Trump administration, would have deemed too dangerous or sensitive to share with these regimes. She just says, actually, they're our friends. I mean, you know, it would be like, it's like throwing open the CIA files to exactly the people that everybody has spent, you know, the last 80 years hiding this information from them. I don't know what comes of this. But this small example of it's not that small if your focus is on the conflict in Syria, it's everything. But Yeah, it's certainly very revealing, but I think ultimately this is less driven by her affinity for the Assad regime than it is for, I don't know, for whatever reason, aligning herself with, and I don't know, maybe, I mean, I guess there's the possibility. I guess if I thought she was versed in international relations and just simply thought, I mean, I guess you could say, well, the decline of the United States as a superpower, the sole remaining superpower, is ultimately inevitable, and they're being overtaken in many ways by Chinese foreign policy anyway, and it'll be very difficult to compete on that level, and it won't last for very long. And in any case, the Chinese don't stand on their own alone these days anyway, which I guess explains the emergence of the BRICS alliance. And I mean, I guess if you think the political polarity of the world is shifting towards the BRICS alliance, you can, I suppose there's got to be a school of thought, whether you agree with it or not. I mean, it's certainly worth debating. Is the polarity of the world shifting in that direction? And if so, is it something that the United States can make some sort of last stand on, or delay the inevitability, if there is an inevitability of a shift towards the BRICS alliance? Or do you make some sort of weird attempt to find a place for yourself in the BRICS alliance and either join it and exert influence that way, or join it in what's supposed to look like an attempt to exert influence there, but really it's an it's a clandestine attempt to break it up and pull, parts of the BRICS alliance along with us in the opposite directions. Like, what if it was a brilliant plot to insinuate ourselves into the alliance and then drive a wedge between India and Russia/China and Brazil, for that matter, and pull Brazil and India in a different direction. Or, I don't know whether we think we exert that kind of influence in South Africa or not, but it's a weird alliance, so maybe it could be fractured. And I suppose there's at least a, spy novel level interesting story in the idea of insinuating ourselves into the alliance, as unbelievable as that would be. I guess nothing's unbelievable in the Trump era, so they just use that as cover. It's so crazy, it just might work. Or it could just be a total sellout, and there's no long-term strategic American interest involved. She just thinks she'll get a gigantic payday and lots of money, or I don't know what. And just like everything else with the Trump administration, it's hard to say. It could be any number of terrible and previously unthinkable possibilities that are happening here. But to continue with this article, to see whether we can use it to help divine which direction we're actually headed in here. Let's see. We left off with the idea that Gabbard was visiting with Assad with an idea, she said, an aim of bringing an end to the war. And I mean, I imagine that's why everybody visits. But, there's two ways, of course, to bring an end to the war. Well, three more, possibly. One would be to win it. The other would be to surrender it. And then the third would be to broker some kind of negotiation down the middle. That's the hard one. Winning it is a hard one, too. It's an easy decision. Let's win this war. Harder to execute. Then the easy is let's surrender. You can definitely do that and get the outcome you were looking for. And then, splitting the baby down the middle and trying to come to some negotiated settlement, also very difficult. All right. So she's gone to end the war, and there's a quote here she gives. I felt it's important that if we profess to truly care about the Syrian people and about their suffering, then we've got to be able to meet with anyone that we need to if there's a possibility that we could achieve peace, she told CNN at the time, which sounds an awful lot like settling, like the way a lot of Trump types have gone about trying to sound reasonable about the way they want to settle the Ukraine war. Well, we want to find peace. Yeah, everybody wants to find peace. But, you're saying maybe we could get peace by surrendering. And you can. Not security, but you can get peace. We give up. We will stop fighting and let you conquer us. Now we have peace, as described by an absence of active military action. But if you're under military occupation, that's not very peaceful. Gabbard was forced to defend her embrace of Assad and other dictators during her 2020 run for the Democratic presidential nomination. During the Democratic primary debate, she clashed with Kamala Harris, who accused her of being an apologist for an individual, Assad, who has murdered the people of his country like cockroaches. That's pretty strong. She has embraced and been an apologist for him in a way that she refuses to call him a war criminal. I can only take what she says and her opinion so seriously, and I'm prepared to move on, she added. Harris, who would subsequently drop out of the race and later be selected as Joe Biden's running mate. They helpfully remind us when Russia invaded Ukraine, Gabbard again defended Russian aggression. Oddly enough. Right. So if you're looking for a through line there, well, Russian aggression involved in both, and she defended it both times. That seems to be the thing about which she's most consistent. Don't know whether she cares about Syria or the Syrians. This war and this suffering could easily have been avoided, she said, I guess, if the Biden administration / NATO had simply acknowledged Russia's legitimate security concerns, she posted on Twitter in 2022. That's an odd way of putting it. Of course, this conflict could have been avoided if Russia had simply acknowledged Ukraine's legitimate security concerns. But you know how wars are. They're so weird. Gabbard appeared to fall for various conspiracy theories about the conflict that were promoted by Russia, as she has done in Syria. One of those conspiracy theories was a Russian claim about the existence of dozens of U.S.-funded biolabs in Ukraine that were supposedly producing deadly pathogens. She later walked back those remarks, suggesting that there might have been some, quote, miscommunication and misunderstanding. I see. Gabbard's frequent echoing of Kremlin talking points has earned her praise in Russian state media. Indeed, an article published on November 15th in the Russian state-controlled outlet RIA Novosti went so far as to call Gabbard a, quote, superwoman. How interesting. The possibility that Trump would tap someone with Gabbard's history to be America's top intelligence official shouldn't be a surprise to anyone who followed the president-elect's first 4 years in the White House. During his 2018 summit with President Vladimir Putin in Helsinki, the then president was asked if he believed the U.S. intelligence community's assessment, which stated that Russia had interfered in the 2016 presidential election on his behalf. That assessment was based on analysis of what was determined to have been state-sponsored campaigns of fake social media posts and ersatz news sites to spread false stories about his Democratic opponent, Hillary Clinton, as well as cyber attacks targeting the Democratic National Committee and prominent operatives associated with the Clinton administration. But Trump, who just spent several hours in a closed-door meeting with Putin, stunned the assembled press and the entire world by declaring that he trusted the Russian leader's word over that of his own advisors. And then the Russian leader handed him a bugged soccer ball to keep in the White House, and he did it. Oh, well. It doesn't say that here. That's odd. President Putin says this is Trump. It's not Russia. I don't see any reason why it would be, he replied, except that he asked them to do it. But besides that, Trump would go on to repeatedly clash with his own intelligence appointees during the remainder of his term. He sacked, remember this is a British paper, he sacked his first DNI, a former Indiana Senator Dan Coates. I forgot all about his participation in the administration. After Coates repeatedly declined to back away from the government's assessment of what Russia had done during the 2016 presidential race. Larry Pfeiffer, or possibly Pfeiffer, depending. I've seen both pronunciations there. The director of George Mason University's Hayden Center for Intelligence, Policy, and International Security said Gabbard's apparent susceptibility to foreign disinformation and her affinity for strongmen will give pause to American allies with whom the U.S. routinely shares intelligence on common threats. Great way to blow up the, what do they call it, the Five Eyes coalition, who share intelligence, traditional allies who have been strong allies since the end of World War II, but F the hell out of all of that. All you got to do is put in a Russian spy, and then everyone will say, maybe we don't share any information anymore. Because giving it to the United States means giving it away to the people that all Five Eyes used to want to hide it from. Both the Kremlin and international terrorist organizations as well. Okay, that's not so great. Intelligence services, he explained, and this is, again, somebody at George Mason University, who I guess is going to find themselves on the chopping block pretty soon, as the incoming administration says, either get rid of this guy who said these terrible things about my team, or George Mason University, that bastion of liberal intelligentsia, will be on the chopping block. Hey, Glenn Youngkin, get him in line. Intelligence services, he explained, are notoriously territorial and tight-lipped on sources and methods, particularly when it comes to so-called human intelligence, or HUMINT, as they now shorten it to, which refers to information collected by and from spies and sources within hostile governments. Pfeiffer said foreign allies are likely already concerned about how a second Trump administration will handle intelligence, given the president-elect's record as a spy himself. He also predicted that Gabbard's confirmation as DNI would cause even more problems among skittish partners. I think they wouldn't feel like they've got an American confidant that they can deal with on a mature level, he said. I can guarantee you that the foreign intelligence services of Europe, including the Brits, are all having little side conversations right about now. What is this going to mean? And how are we going to operate? And what are we going to do now? The former U.S. intelligence veteran also said Gabbard's record of spreading foreign talking points call into question whether she will be able to carry out the DNI's important responsibility of briefing the president on threats to the nation. He told The Independent, somebody like Tulsi Gabbard, you look at her long history of statements that seem to come out of the Kremlin's notebook, her propensity to be influenced by their viewpoint, it raises questions as to whether she has the ability to present the intel community's perspective as it is, or she's going to be one who's going to want to discount it, influence it, color and change it, or ignore it, and just present her own view, or Kremlin's view, whichever, if there are differences. I think it also raises the question of judgment. You know, here's an individual who seems very prone to misinformation, prone to conspiracy theory. That should worry anybody who's worried about America's national security, he added. Trump's selection of the former Hawaii congresswoman could be a problem for the senators tasked with confirming her on several different levels. For one, the position is unique among cabinet agencies in that there are strict requirements for who can serve in the director's role. The text of the 2004 law, which established the Office of the Director of National Intelligence in the wake of the 9/11 terror attacks, and the intelligence community's the intelligence community's failures leading up to the U.S. invasion in Iraq, another motivator, specifically states that any person who serves in a DNI job, quote, shall have extensive national security expertise, or will not. I mean, who gets to make that decision? You guys who are doing the confirmations. It's up to you. The first person to serve as DNI, John Negroponte, was a widely respected Foreign Service veteran who had served as U.S. ambassador to Iraq, Mexico, Honduras, and the Philippines, as the country's ambassador to the United Nations, and as a deputy national security advisor during the Reagan administration. The next three people to hold the office were flag-rank military officers with significant intelligence experience. Pfeiffer, a U.S. intelligence veteran himself of 3 decades standing, who once ran the White House Situation Room and served as chief of staff to then CIA Director General Michael Hayden. In case you were wondering, what is Pfeiffer doing at the Hayden Center for da-da-da-da-da? There is your answer. He told The Independent that Gabbard's experience in the House and her military service, while admirable, do not match the standards envisioned by the authors of the 2004 law, which established the office. But we need to go back to the Founding Fathers to find out. The Founding Fathers of this 2004 law, their vision is lost to history. We can't be sure anymore. Well, we can, but it doesn't matter. That's the national security experience, but she was a freaking military cop operating at a largely tactical level, not that strategic, long-term national security perspective that one would expect. he said. Gabbard may have left the Syrian conflict behind, but Mustafa still works with its victims every day, and he believes the connection between her views on Syria and Ukraine is clear. What happened in Syria is what allowed the Russians to feel that they could do the very same in Ukraine, he said. And what she's doing with Ukraine shows that it goes beyond her maybe understanding one conflict. She is hook, line, and sinker a Russian puppet, sort of person that you ordinarily would say that would actually make a very bad director of national intelligence. So it's out there. It's floating around. People have been saying it for a long time, but we haven't really read through any of those articles of late. Okay, let's see some other things that we need to share. Gosh, there are so many. How about this from the Washington Post, just to catch you up on what people have been talking about over the weekend. You know it, and you knew it was coming. So it's not a surprise, but we want to put it on the record. Trump plans to fire Jack Smith's team. Jack Smith, of course, will resign ahead of time. And use the DOJ to probe the 2020 election. You remember how it's important for incoming U.S. presidents to look forward and not back, right? So Democrats win, they come in, and, we should really be doing something about drawing definitive lines about lawbreaking, prosecuting the lawbreakers and criminals from the previous administration. No, it's un-American. It's banana republic stuff. We don't do that. America wants to look forward, not backward. Everyone is worried about the economy. We got to talk about that time after time after time. Republicans, though, at least this one, runs on, I'll be your retribution, your revenge machine. And the new mission of the Department of Justice come 2025 is not only looking backwards, but looking 5 years backwards. And as the Supreme Court extends immunity to the president to carry out official acts, all of the people who actually do the day-to-day work of carrying out the official acts of the president and working as part of the executive branch will have no immunity as he roots them out and singles them out for prosecution. Isn't that great? The plans, the subheader says, show how President-elect Donald Trump wants to use the Justice Department to address his own personal grievances. We tried to get the message through to him 100 times during the first administration. The Attorney General is not your personal lawyer. It doesn't seem to have taken root. Who's worked on this article? Amy Gardner, Josh Dawsey, Ashley Parker, and Perry Stein together back on the 22nd, end of last week. President-elect Donald Trump plans to fire the entire team that worked with Special Counsel Jack Smith, everybody, top to bottom, to pursue 2 federal prosecutions against the former president, including career attorneys typically protected from political retribution, according to 2 individuals close to Trump's transition. Trump is also planning to assemble investigative teams within the Justice Department to hunt for evidence in battleground states that fraud tainted the 2020 election, one of the people said. Right. So there are people currently right now in jail, very often on state charges, sometimes federal charges as well, who went hunting for this information, did so illegally, found nothing, by the way, and ended up in jail for breaking into storage facilities and into voting machines and stealing the hard drives right out of those things on the big hunt for this evidence, which, in 60 plus cases was found not to exist anywhere. It was all made up. But now there's going to be DOJ departments dedicated to, or bureaus dedicated to hunting down this information on behalf of the guy who once stood there with a weather map and said, no, I was right about the hurricane possibly hitting Alabama. Look at this map, and drawing a semicircle with a Sharpie by hand and saying, this is the information that's before you. Not the information on the map. The information I tell you is on the map now that I have put a Sharpie in my hand. He will just say, we found the information. And there was a paper in the vault that said Joe Biden did it. So we're just going to have to execute the guy. Sorry. I don't know how far it will extend. We'll see how sophisticated they want the evidence to look. Trump is also planning, as we said, we just read this, to assemble these investigative teams. The proposals offer new evidence that Trump's intention to dramatically shake up, we'll say, the status quo in Washington, that's one way of putting it, is likely to focus heavily on the Justice Department, the nation's premier law enforcement agency. It's the one and only. And that at least some of his agenda is fueled not by ideology or policy goals, but personal grievance, which I think the founders probably had something to say about it not being a particularly good idea in terms of running the government. Asked about Trump's plans to fire prosecutors on Smith's team and investigate the 2020 election, a Trump spokesperson echoed the president-elect's frequent claim that the Justice Department cases against him were politically motivated. This time it's Caroline Leavitt. I'm glad we're seeing more of her, unless Stephen Chung. He's quite annoying, but he's got a White House job coming to him, so he's not going to disappear. President Trump, okay, do we care about? Well, I guess we get the mindset when we read their statement. President Trump campaigned on firing rogue bureaucrats. They were executing Justice Department policy, clear as day, but now they're rogue bureaucrats because he doesn't like them, who have engaged in illegal weaponization of our American justice system. And the American people can expect he will deliver on that promise because, of course, every Republican accusation is a confession, but you can't just go around charging him because he confesses. Leave him alone. He's being honest with you. One of the many reasons that President Trump won the election in a landslide, there it is again, no, is Americans are sick and tired of seeing their tax dollars spent on targeting the Biden-Harris administration's political enemies rather than going after real, violent criminals on our streets, like people who beat cops. After the initial publication of this article, Trump's team sent another statement from Leavitt, quote, President Trump and his transition team speaks for him, and anonymous sources not affiliated with him have no idea what they are talking about, it said, which is the same statement that they've had to issue over and over and over again. If Trump doesn't say it, they're allowed to back away from it. And if Trump does say it, they're still allowed to back away from it. No, you misunderstand. What he really meant was this, and if people don't absorb that information, that backing off, the newspapers will just sane wash it and say, no, that's really what he meant. Trump still speaks frequently about the 2020 election, which he lost to Joe Biden, but continues to insist was stolen from him in key battleground states. And he has maintained from the start that Smith's investigations into his efforts to reverse his defeat, as well as his alleged mishandling of classified documents after he left the White House, are examples of the weaponization of government against him that must be avenged. And I did think today what they need to do is a rebranding effort for that cache of stolen classified documents that he kept in the bathroom at his Mar-a-Lago sex dungeon. It's not international espionage. It is not theft of classified documents. It was one of those free libraries. He just didn't get around to building the little cabinet, the glass-fronted cabinet that comes with it. But you're welcome when using the bathroom at Mar-a-Lago to peruse the national secrets, because after all, you're a taxpayer. Or you might also be a Chinese spy and a foreign national with lots of money. But the point is the same. I will regard you as either. And once you've paid your $200,000, the free little library is yours. That's all. It's just a big misunderstanding. As he again becomes president, Trump, quote, wants to clean out the, quote, again, bad guys, the people who went after me, said one of the individuals familiar with the plans. I don't know whether they meant that's Trump saying I want to get rid of the people who go after me, or whether Trump wants to come in and get rid of the guys who went after me, this other person, which may actually be true. But who, like other people, I guess, spoke on condition of anonymity because of how right he is. The person noted that the idea of assembling investigative teams of federal agents and prosecutors in battleground states is less well-formed and, quote, not at the top of the list, unlike the president-elect's oft-proclaimed desire to clean house at the Justice Department. Trump reiterated that goal on Thursday after his first pick for Attorney General, former Congressman Matt Gaetz, withdrew from consideration. For too long, who's speaking here? Trump, writes here, in his voice, for too long, the partisan Department of Justice has been weaponized against me and other Republicans, Trump wrote when announcing his new pick, longtime ally Pam Bondi, in a post on Truth Social. Not anymore. Pam will refocus the DOJ to its intended purpose of fighting crime and making America safe again. It's not clear how quickly or easily Trump could fire career staff, including the prosecutors who worked for Smith on the classified documents and election obstruction cases. Appeals on several fronts delayed the cases from going to trial before the November election, and the Justice Department's policy prohibits prosecuting sitting presidents. Smith is expected to submit court filings in both cases on December 2nd, explaining how he plans to wind them down. That didn't really follow.
Hi, everybody. It's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and Patreon.com, Patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, Patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We got one more segment to run through more of this stuff on Monday. I happened to see Justice was reminding us, remember, by the way, when Trump had the DOJ investigate the millions of illegals bust into New Hampshire before the 2016 election that he won. Yeah, this is he's got a long history of making these kinds of allegations and then not following up. There is that. I mean, he does get distracted easily. Something you have to keep in mind. It's not necessarily that he doesn't intend really to do it. It's just that he has a very bad record of remembering the things that he was threatening to do and following up on it. And to the extent that it requires any work, whether it's signing paperwork or just assigning people a certain job and then following up and hearing their reports and deciding what to do next, he is awful bad at that. And, you know, that may or may not save us from certain catastrophes. It's just impossible to predict which ones. It's a matter of what will he forget and which ones will other people be less interested in reminding him of, or how distracted does he get, or, you know, does he have a golf tee time, whatever. But this paragraph that we read before leaving, I was like, this doesn't hold together, right? It starts out by saying it's not clear how quickly or easily Trump could fire career staff, including the prosecutors who worked for Smith on the classified documents and obstruction cases, and then goes on to say, well, it doesn't discuss that. It instead discusses Trump successfully delayed the proceedings in those cases for so long that the election ended up getting in the way, and then he won the election. And so all those cases are going to be dismissed. But the real interesting question is, well, it's not clear how quickly or easily Trump could fire career staff. Why not? Why is it not clear? And the answer, I guess, is, well, a lot of these people are sometimes by regulation, sometimes by norm, sometimes by law, protected from being fired at the whim of the president or for political reasons. But one, when they say it's not clear how quickly or easily, well, they can file appeals both internally and administratively. They can file lawsuits. And under normal circumstances, this is litigation that could last for a long time. Sometimes people win the litigation and have to be reinstated. Sometimes it takes so long to win the appeals such that you get your reinstatement or you have your rights to reinstatement vindicated, but it's been 3 years, 4 years, you've moved on, and you just say, well, I just wanted to, prove a point. So sometimes it's useless anyway. Sometimes people really do want to go back, but it's no longer clear that courts will follow the precedent. They say things like, well, you can't just fire these people. Why do you say that? Because people have been fired this way in the past and they've sued and won. And in this country, you look at that precedent and say that will be directly applicable to your case. And courts are supposed to, and in fact are in practice prone to believe in the value of prior precedent, and will say, well, the last time a president fired somebody from the Department of Justice for no good reason, let's just simplify it down to that, that person won reinstatement. So that'll be directly applicable here because you claim you have been fired for no good reason, and there's a great recitation of the facts that make a pretty good case to buy into the notion that, it looks like it was no good reason, just like the last time, and here's the outcome from last time, so that'll be the outcome this time. And you can't count on that anymore, either because some judges that Trump appointed will just say, I differentiate between the two cases. I think it was for no good reason the first time, but the second one is a pretty good reason. I can't explain it, but it feels pretty good. Or you just say, that whole thing about not being allowed to fire people for no good reason was just an erroneous decision. Presidents should be able to fire people for no good reason. I don't know which option they'll choose. I don't know that it'll matter. I don't know that they'll do that. But there's a pretty good chance. It's every indication, and lots of people say that's exactly how we want to handle it. And in most cases it is. That, no, those decisions that said you have to have a good reason are wrong. The president doesn't have to have any reason. We're just going to rule that way. And you can appeal it all you want, but in the end, 6 out of 9 justices on the Supreme Court will say, president can do pretty much whatever they want. Until they come for me, I guess, in which case, let's hope that we, hold it together to protect our genius brains here on the Supreme Court. Anyway, I don't know. That should have been the balance of that paragraph instead of reminding us that, yes, Trump also, as he always did, both in civilian life and as president, delayed every investigation and criminal case and civil case that he could in the hopes he's doing what I have been advocating people to delay everything, even if it's only for an hour, even if it's only for a day. Anything could happen in any of that time. And you could come up with a theory that might even be true or might be so plausible that it sticks, even if it isn't true, that the person prosecuting you has engaged in some sort of misconduct, and therefore the whole case should be dismissed. And if you get enough people to say so on Truth Social, sometimes it works, or at least it triggers something in the judge's mind. Well, I would like to clear this up. This is ridiculous and utterly unfounded in reality, but to demonstrate that and how transparent and dedicated to the course of equal justice before the law for everyone we are here in the United States courts, we will have a hearing on that, and we will conduct an investigation just to show that this wasn't the case, but it's going to take 6 months. And that's 6 months for people to say, I don't care what this investigation reveals. The truth is that it's true that this person is engaged in misconduct, and it's just extending the PR campaign against them for 6 months, and it backfires. So, the point really is it has worked beautifully for Trump to delay on the flimsiest grounds possible. If you can get that delay, take it, as dumb as it seems. And we ought to be doing the same. And I discussed over the weekend a theory and a sports metaphor for that. And maybe, I don't know, today may not be the day to read that out, but we got all week. And we're going to be looking for introspection like that eventually as the news cycle slows down a little bit, I hope, this week. So where were we? Okay, so it's not clear how quickly or easily he can fire everybody. Then they talked about something else entirely. Are they going back to it? Before Trump left office in 2021, he passed an executive order. Signed. I mean, there's no passage, but okay. Signs an executive order known as the Schedule F rule, which would have reclassified huge swaths of career government employees and made it easier for him to fire them. Biden reversed that order when he entered the White House, and his administration finalized rules through the Office of Personnel Management bolstering protections for career staffers. That's how you want to handle that, right? But if you're just going to bulldoze laws and regulations, but what's the difference? Trump has vowed to reinstate the Schedule F rule, however. Even if he succeeds, legal experts said it could take years to implement the rule as the untested issue of firing masses of federal workers makes its way through the courts. True. And like we said, all these, litigation often takes forever. So you might say, well, see, the two can play at this game. We could make it very difficult. It could take years to implement the rule. Or they could change the locks at your department. Or now, of course, that just means what? Turning off your key codes, right? Your scan badge, and just deactivate it, which I assume if a competent person is put in charge of this thing, and that's also a big if, you could do, and you could get at least 85 to 90% correct inside of a couple of days. You might screw up here and there. Those people might pull some amazing kind of feat when their key cards still work. Who knows? But with it all being electronic access, I assume that, that's something you can shut off, right? And if you can do it all from a centralized location, as opposed to going around collecting keys from people or posting guards so that when people come to use their keys, you round them up. It's still a pretty big deal to break into a government facility, even as a former employee, I would imagine. But it may be that they could do it. And do they care about doing it right? No, probably not. Will they accidentally turn off the key cards on some of their own people? Yes, they probably will. But then we'll be suing about that instead of suing about the right to fire them. They've excluded them from doing any work, and that will become the focus of the litigation instead. And they'll make that last 6 years, such that people end up having to drop their suits because they can't hold on without a salary for all that long. And eventually they'll take another job and therefore drop this one, which courts will take as an excuse to moot their lawsuits over their improper filing. You resigned this job in the end anyway, so the whole point is moot. No, I only resigned because they were illegally locking me out. Yeah, well, tomato, tomato, says the courts. Protections that Biden put in, this thing says, will help, but it will be a fight, says Rushab Sanghvi, acting. Oh, I needed my acting thing. He's an acting general counsel at the American Federation of Government Employees. Not the same thing as being an acting government official, but an acting union official, which represents some Justice Department employees, though not prosecutors. Smith's office is composed of dozens of attorneys, FBI agents also, and support staff from throughout the Justice Department, many with specialties in national security and public corruption cases. Some are former Justice Department employees plucked from private practice. Most, however, are mid and upper level career staffers on detail to the special counsel's team from divisions within the main Justice Department building in downtown Washington or from U.S. attorneys' offices throughout the country. In the past, after a special counsel investigation winds down, such staff attorneys typically have returned to their regular jobs after their temporary assignments concluded. Some members of Smith's team have already done that. In other cases, departments that loaned employees have not yet been informed when or whether they will return, according to a person familiar with the situation who, like others interviewed, spoke on condition of anonymity to discuss personnel matters. Plans for federal election fraud investigations in swing states are less well-defined, but several officials who defended the 2020 voting in key battlegrounds said they have been bracing for the possibility. Since there's, and how are they bracing for it? Well, unfortunately, in many cases, as Democrats. How do I mean? Here's the quote from Michigan Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson, who says, "Since there's no malfeasance, we will certainly work with anyone who wants to investigate our work." Oh, dear. "But we will expect them to act with integrity." Do I have a buzzer? I need a... We expect them to act with integrity. Sorry, Jocelyn, I don't think that they're going to. "And go where the facts, not their agendas, will lead. We have nothing to hide, so we'll just share that information and access to it with the people who are going to lie about it and weather chart Sharpie their way into creating evidence that I'm a big traitor. Boy, I feel so foolish having invited them in now that I am going to prison." Well, what else are you going to do? I'm not exactly sure what to advise you. You can't stand at the doorway and prevent them from getting in because they'll just play that as, what are they hiding? And then if you say, I'm hiding nothing, they'll say, good. Then in that case, we're going to hide you in prison. There's no winning with these guys. Maybe the thing to do is to just say, F you. Yeah, I'm not transparent. Okay, boo-hoo. What am I hiding? I'm hiding the evidence that you're a criminal. How do you like that? Just say that, I guess. Trump has continued to trumpet his allegations about 2020 using ominous language to suggest that he would try to criminally prosecute state officials. But neither the president-elect nor his allies have ever provided evidence to prove their claims of voter fraud. And they did not make similar claims during this month's election after Trump emerged as the victor. In September, he claimed without evidence in a social media post that there was, quote, rampant cheating in 2020 and promised that those responsible would, quote, be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, and maybe even more, I would say, which will include long-term prison sentences. Please beware, Trump wrote on Truth Social, that this legal exposure extends to capitalized lawyers, political operatives, donors, illegal voters, and corrupt election officials. And by the way, for comma usage fans, political operatives, donors, illegal voters, comma, ampersand, corrupt election officials. I've never seen that one before. Those involved in unscrupulous behavior will be sought out, caught, it's him again, right? And prosecuted at... How could I mistake this for anybody else's writing? Those involved in unscrupulous behavior will be sought out, caught, and prosecuted at levels, unfortunately, never seen before in our country. That's so vintage. Levels never seen before. I mean, I guess I've always wondered, Trump's embarrassed about nothing, of course. So I guess the answer is no, he doesn't notice or care or anything. But, wouldn't you, as a normal person, be embarrassed to so frequently say things like, at levels never seen before in our country, over and over and over and over? Like, it's a tell for him. I guess everything's a tell. If he's speaking, he's lying. That's the tell. But, wouldn't that be embarrassing to you if you had that kind of speech pattern? I think even other presidents who are like normal people, right? At some level, does it ever, I think it probably does finally occur to Barack Obama that he's got his own verbal question. Let me be clear. Oh, God. Why did I just say that again? I can't believe I just said that again. Right. And, of course, the malarkey thing. Or, come on, man. But at least that's at least off the cuff sounding. Let me be clear. It's a very Ivy League crutch, I guess. But it's better than things happening like never seen before at levels we've never heard of in this country. Prosecutions at levels. It's not even. All right. Anyway, that's kind of where his head is. Let's conclude this thing and get out of here with this article. Among the accusations Trump and his allies have lobbed at Benson and others, they allowed the counting of ballots from non-citizens, dead people, or out-of-state residents. No proof of that. Never been able to gather it, didn't happen, et cetera, et cetera. They also claim that they illegally altered election rules during the coronavirus pandemic that allowed cheating to occur. And they barred GOP poll workers from observing or counting. Oh, somehow I guess I have to turn off this notice I've got of texts to come in. So because now the big desktop thinks I need this messages on, and I don't, and I tried to turn that off, and let's see if we can keep that permanently off, because now if I get spam texts, if they come in over Apple text, they make dings, and then people think that the show is starting all over again. It's the same ding note. All right, pardon the interruption. Yeah, so of course none of this stuff ever happened. The coronavirus rules changes that they claimed, they still claim, and they lost every time they brought this case, and they got it to an appeals court and still lost over and over again. And I think the Supreme Court at some point rejected even hearing the appeal, but their interpretation of constitutional language that makes them believe that any rule of any kind governing any sort of execution of any kind of election procedure, the color and shape of a drop box, that's got to be decided by the state legislature. And if local officials or elections officials decide we're going to order these boxes and they're going to be green instead of blue, that's a violation of the Constitution. It's just, it's the most ludicrous possible interpretation, and they're still hanging their hat on this stuff. Let's see. One individual close to Trump's transition effort who heard of the possibility that the new administration would investigate the alleged 2020 fraud said it's possible such an effort could be led by Trump-appointed U.S. attorneys in the battleground states, but it could also be assigned to a task force or special counsel. I don't really know that matters since it'll all be Trump appointed. What's clear is that the effort would reside within the Justice Department, and the incoming president's selections so far to lead that law enforcement agency are loyalists. Either people like Bondi or Gaetz, who stood by him unwaveringly even after January 6th, or personal attorneys that have helped defend him before against criminal charges. So I guess we'll find out which kinds of toadies he'll be using for that effort in the next couple of days. Speaking of that, let me throw in this one here. I thought this was an interesting platform for discussion. Ashley Parker, Josh Dawsey, Michael Scherer on this piece, and I think I saw Karen Tumulty sharing it. So I kind of expected to see that maybe she was on the byline. She just thought it was a good article, I guess, unless the one I was thinking of is still in pocket elsewhere. Sharp elbows and raised voices inside Trump's bumpy transition. His freewheeling team, it's a little bit of sane washing, has returned to the patterns of his first term in office with shouting matches, expulsions from meetings, and name-calling. And this was something I commented on over the weekend when I did see Karen Tumulty sharing this thing. We often say, the best presidents, the most effectives, why? They've assembled a team of rivals. And there's something, I guess, that goes beyond team of rivals that describes the Trump teams. These are all guys who are men and women stabbing one another in the back, left and right, trying to get ahead in Trump circles and be the last one to sit next to him and whisper in his ear. This is, to me, a team of Hagues, a team of Alexander Hagues. We mentioned him the other day. As of now, I'm in charge here at the White House. They all think that they're going to be the new person in charge at the White House, either the Trump whisperer, or if Trump dies or is incapacitated in some way, there's going to be a power struggle over who leads. And constitutionally, it's J.D. Vance. But J.D. Vance, again, I've said this last week, right? Whoever takes over is taking over a cult of personality. And it is someone else's personality, so you're behind the eight ball there. And two, J.D. Vance has no personality of his own. He can't even convert a Trump cult of personality into a Vance cult of personality. So the question is, which of the 10,000 people who think they're the indispensable one will become the one who calls the shots? Donald would have, Mr. Trump, President Trump would have wanted it this way. and they all think it's them. Like Alexander Haig thought he was in charge at the White House. No, there's a very clear line of succession. That's actually what made the quote so ridiculous. He came out and he explained what he thought was the line of succession. You have the president and the vice president and the secretary of state. No, it doesn't go to the secretary of state next. Sorry, you're not the next one in line. But anyway, that was part of the reason why it was dumb. And then, of course, the hubris of me, I win, I won the big lottery, I'm in charge. No, you're not. They're going to have a team of Haigs. They all think they're the ones that are going to take over. And, dang, now that I was thinking about something. Oh, right. I was talking about how everybody now knows that if you're the last one to speak to him, you can get anything done. Something Scott shared with me after the show on Friday, which came from Tobias Barrington Wolf. I don't know who that is, but what a name. Holy cow. But Tobias Barrington Wolf on Threads was saying that he was, I think he's a reporter, reporting indicated that the Gaetz nomination was not planned. A lot of these nominations are sort of tweeted out, and like we said with Kelly Loeffler, the direction changes. But the Gaetz nomination was not planned. That is to say, there was no master plan behind any of it, up to and including the idea that, well, we'll nominate a terrible guy first, and then we'll throw him overboard, and then we'll slip by another terrible guy who, if he was first, would have been rejected. I don't think they do that kind of planning. I mean, Karl Rove maybe, but not him. But reporting that indicated that the Gaetz nomination was not planned, not the product of any strategy. It happened because Gaetz got himself seated next to Trump on his plane, flattered him into thinking the appointment would be great, and then manipulated him into announcing it on social media right away. He then comments, this administration will be a nonstop exercise in foreign autocrats and domestic grifters positioning themselves to exploit this cognitively impaired man into whatever action will serve their interests. And super dangerous stuff of science fiction, really, well beyond the threat of the Manchurian candidate. The idea that a president can be manipulated that way, I think you just saw it happen. There's really very little other explanation for Matt Gaetz. But what about this team of Haigs, as I say, in their reporting here in the Washington Post? Let's squeeze in at least as much as we can before it's time to take off for the day. Donald Trump's attorney and advisor Boris Epstein, probably among one of the more dangerous operators, most dangerous operators he's got going, I think, recently arrived for a meeting about cabinet picks in the tea room at Mar-a-Lago. I didn't realize the T stands for torture, by the way, but the tea, like sipping tea. They have that because classy. It's classy to have a tea room at Mar-a-Lago, only to find his way blocked. Boris was blocked. Transition chair, who should be capable of this, right? Howard Lutnick, CEO of Cantor Fitzgerald, used to getting his way, right? Told Epstein in front of others that this was not a meeting for him. We're not talking legal nominees today, Lutnick said, according to one person familiar with the exchange. All of our nominees are going to be illegal, you see. Epstein refused to budge. Using his forearm, he pushed Lutnick out of the way. Might as well show these guys who the leopards really are here, right? According to two people familiar with the incident, which Lutnick later recounted to others, I'm coming in, Epstein retorted. According to one of the people. A third person described the incident more as Epstein simply brushing past Lutnick on his way into the meeting, and someone close to both men said the two, quote, have been working closely together in assisting President Trump in putting together the greatest administration in American history. They don't identify him? That sounds like Stephen Chung. Epstein and Lutnick both declined to comment. In any other presidential transition, such a showdown and physical confrontation between two top advisors to the president-elect would be a show-stopping breakdown in decorum. But in Trump's, as they say, freewheeling orbit, the incident was soon forgotten, as his team has returned to the patterns of his first term in office, with shouting matches, expulsions from meetings, and name-calling, all between the public celebrations and rocket ship photo ops. As during Trump's first term, competing factions have begun to run roughshod over each other, sometimes kicking up clouds of dust. This portrait of Trump's blooming team of rivals, wrong, is the result of, certainly understates the situation, is the result of interviews and, got to stop the clock here, with more than half a dozen aides, advisors, confidants, and others involved in the transition process, many of whom spoke on a condition of anonymity to offer a candid assessment. That's just standard setup stuff. But whenever they say things like, this is the number of interviews that we did, you're in for a long read. And certainly true here. Not going to get through the bulk of it, but let's give you an example before we cut out. Elon Musk, who has embraced the nickname First Buddy, he likes it, on his social network, X, in case you forgot the name of it, got in a recent tense discussion at Mar-a-Lago with Epstein in full view of others, said people familiar with the incident. Incoming Chief of Staff Susie Wiles also has had to traffic cop meetings, asking people to leave when they're not welcome. And even Vice President J.D. Vance, remember him? He took to social media this week to dress down a lieutenant of another Trump whisperer, Stephen K. G.B. Bannon, calling her, this is an assistant to Bannon, a mouth-breathing imbecile. Wow. For criticizing Vance's decision to work with Trump instead of attending Senate votes. Okay. You tell me. Many of the power centers in the first Trump term have moved on, with his daughter and son-in-law, Ivanka and Jared, keeping their distance, allegedly, as far as we can tell. Kellyanne Conway, Trump's 2016 campaign manager and White House senior advisor, is also not expected to return to the administration. And Bannon, a former top White House advisor, now operates from a distance. But then again, he spent his whole campaign distancing himself from Project 2025. And guess what? That was obviously a lie. And all the 2025 authors are in the White House this time around. But a few new camps have formed with little sign that Trump sees conflict as a problem at this point. He never did. He loves the chaos. At the same time, none of the people interviewed for this article described factions as vast and warring as during the 2016 transition and early days of the first Trump White House. And Trump has picked cabinet members quickly, essentially filling most of the top jobs before Thanksgiving and then losing some of them. While some of the picks are viewed as challenging Senate confirmations, many have been seen as widely praised by Republicans. The president loves when people are kind of going at it with each other because often it is the way to get the right people, said someone involved in discussions. Oh, sure, we meant it. It was all on purpose. The chaos really is, but it was supposed to look dumb, and it did.
You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
All right, well, we've been cramming things in all week, but first it is time now to hand things over to Justice Putnam for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Starting off at the top of the menu here, Trump takes aim at Jack Smith, Biden appointed judges, and individual federal workers by name. Yeah, that makes things different, doesn't it? Stay tuned, and we'll see you tomorrow.